Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today, Mitzvah Hashem, Daf Yudalin Amud Aleph. We begin today a brand new Siman, Siman Kuf Lamed Beis, on Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Siman Kuf Lamed Beis, Dine Kedushas Oovah L'Tzion, the halachos that apply to the Kedushah that we recite within Oovah L'Tzion, Ubay Beis Seifim, and here in this Siman we have two Seifim. So this, we just coming off of the very, very interesting Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph, where we discussed Tachnun. Now we're moving on in the davening, and now we're up to Ashrei and Oovah L'Tzion. So before I start reading the words of the Mechaber, which really are going to apply to Oovah L'Tzion, first I want to take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan and see a little bit about Ashrei. Why is it that we say Ashrei before we say Oovah L'Tzion? So in Siman Kuf Lamed Beis, in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan gives a very nice little hakdama over here to Siman Kuf Lamed Beis, and he says the following. V'achar Chatzi Kaddish, we say a Chatzi Kaddish after Tachnun, Yomru Ashrei v'lamanatzeach Yancha, Oovah L'Tzion v'ata Kadosh. V'atam me Ashrei. Why do we say Ashrei? Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Mishon da'amrin on Reish Brachos, because the Gemara tells us in the beginning of Masechtas Brachos, Daf Daled Amud Beis, Kol ha'omer Tehillah LeDavid Gimel Pa'amim B'chol Yom. Anybody who recites Ashrei, right? Tehillah LeDavid, the capital Tehillim that we quote as Ashrei, does not begin with the words Ashrei. It begins Tehillah LeDavid. So the Gemara says, Kol ha'omer Tehillah LeDavid Gimel Pa'amim B'chol Yom. Anyone who recites Ashrei 3 times, Muftach La'ishu ben ha'olam haba, can be certain that he is going to receive a portion in olam haba. Olachein tikdu b'shachris shnei pa'amim, and for this reason, the Chazal wa Masakid that we should say Ashrei twice in the morning. Echad kaidam at-tefillah, once before Shemoneh Esrei, ve'echad la'achar at-tefillah, and once after Shemoneh Esrei. Uve mincha pamachas, and once by mincha, kaidam hatfila, before Shemoneh Esrei. Now, why is this? Tikeshem shebeshachris yesh shnei kedushos levad kedusha de. In Shachris, we find that we say Kedusha 3 times. We say Kedusha once within Berchas Kriyas Shema. We say Kedusha once when we say what we actually call Kedusha during the Chazaras Hashatz, when the Chazan repeats Shemoneh Esrei. And we say Kedusha a 3rd time in Oovah L'Tzion, Kedusha de Sidra. So says the Aruch HaShulchan, the Geshem shebeshachris yesh shnei Kedushos. Since by Shachris we have Kedusha twice, levad Kedusha de Yotzer, other than the Kedusha she'enoi elo sipor eich hamalachim omrim Kedusha, we have Kedusha twice in Shachris, other than the Kedusha de Yotzer. What's the Kedusha de Yotzer? The Kedusha de Yotzer is the Kedusha in Berchas Kriyas Shema that we recite within the bracha of Yotzer Oyer Uvarei Choshech. Now that Kedusha, says Aruch HaShulchan, is Einoi Elo Sipur. That's, we're telling over a Maaseh Shehaya. We're telling over what happens in Shamayim. That's a Sipur, Eich HaMalachim Omrim Kedusha. We are not saying Kedusha. When we say Kadosh, 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 and Baruch Kavod Hashem Im Kaimai within Berchas Kriyas Shema, that is not really us saying Kedusha. That's us telling over what's going on in Shamayim. We are reciting how the Malachim say Kedusha in Shamayim. Then we have twice during Shachris when we actually say Kedusha. That's the Kedusha of Chazaras Hashatz and the Kedusha of Oovah L'Tzion. Ulechein, and therefore, yesh shnei pa'amim Ashrei b'Shachris. That's why we say Ashrei twice during Shachris. Because since we say Kedusha twice, we say Ashrei twice. What does Ashrei have to do with Kedusha? But first, he says, Uve mincha yesh Kedusha achas. By mincha, there's only one Kedusha, the Kedusha of Chazaras Hashatz. Therefore, tikdu pam achas Ashrei. Therefore, we say Ashrei once by mincha. Uba'arvis leka Kedusha. By Ma'ariv, there's no Kedusha at all. Loi tikdu klal. That's why there's no Ashrei by Ma'ariv. So the first thing we see over here in the Aruch HaShulchan is that there is a connection between Ashrei and Kedushah. Why do we say Ashrei twice by Shacharis? Because in Shacharis we say Kedushah twice. The third Kedushah that we say in Berachas Kriya Shema, that doesn't count, because that's a Sipur Dvarim. That's just us saying what goes on in Shemayim. But we say Kedushah twice by Shacharis, so we have Ashrei twice. Mincha, we say Kedushah once, we have Ashrei once. Now, what's the connection between Ashrei and Kedushah? Explains Aruch HaShulchan. The Gam ba'Ashrei yesh Kedushasai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because in Ashrei, we also speak about the Kedushah of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Kediksiv, like we say in Ashrei, Arei Mimcha Elokai HaMelech, Arei Mimcha Elokai HaMelech. I will uplift you and exalt you, my God, the King. Va'avorcha Shimcha, and I will bless your name, Lo'elam Vayed. B'chol Yoyim Avaracheka. What do we say in B'chol Yoyim Avaracheka? Every day I will bench you, Rebbeinu Shalom. Va'ahalal Shimcha Lo'elam Vayed. I'll praise your name forevermore. That's Baruch Kvaid Hashem Imkaimya, Yimloich Hashem Lo'elam. Gadol Hashem Umuhulal Ma'id, V'ligdulasam in Cheker. Dar l'dar yishabach masecha, hadar kvaydedecha, ve'ezuz noira isech yemeru. All of these psukim, says the Aruch HaShulchan, lahayrais, these all teach, shehu yisparech, that the Rebbeinu Shalom kutchabrichu, merayma malka bracha usihila, is above and beyond all blessings and all praise. Shezehu inyan kadosh kadosh. That's really the concept of Kedushah. Keloimar, Kedushah is to say that Kadosh umuvdol mikol bruei maila, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Kadosh and apart and separate from all bruei maila, from all of the heavenly beings. The kal v'chomer mi bruei mata, certainly from the earthly beings. Ukishem shebekedusha oimrim maloicha la'aretz kivaydai. And furthermore, the same way when we say Kedusha, we say on the one hand, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Hashem Tzvakos, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Kadosh and far removed from any earthly being. He's way above us. Still, at the same time, we say, Meloicha la'aretz kivaydai, Keloimar, Av shehu Kadosh umuvdol, mikamakai Meloicha la'aretz kivaydai. Still, he deals with us down here in Olam Hazeh, in the Olam of Chumrius, in the Olam of Gashmius. Kemaikein, similarly, ba'Ashrei, in Ashrei, we also say, she'im kol gaidel gedulasai, despite all of the Rebbeinu Shalom's greatness, hu chanun v'racham, he's gracious and merciful, v'toiv la'koil, and good to all, v'racham aval kamasav, and his mercy is on all his creations, v'einei choil elav yisaberu, and the eyes of all turn to him in hope, v'hu noisei lahem es aklam be'itai, and he gives them their sustenance, paiseach es yadecha, umazbiya l'chol chai ratzai. So what we're saying is, despite the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom is so far above us and so removed from us, he still cares for us on a daily basis. That's also what we say in Kedushah, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakos, but still, Meloi Chal Haaretz Kivaydai, Al Derech Sha'amru, this is similar to what Chazal say in Mesechtes Megillah, B'makay Mishata Moitze Gedulasai, where you see the Rebbeinu Shalom's greatness, Sham Ata Moitze Anvasanusai. In the same place, you see his humbleness. Despite his greatness and how exalted he is way beyond us, still he deals with us and takes care of us. So this is why we say Ashrei as a preface to Oovah L'Tzion, and this is why we're going to see later in this Siman that there's actually a halacha that we're not supposed to be mafsik unnecessarily between Ashrei and Oovah L'Tzion. So now, against that backdrop, let's see what the Mechaber says here. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph here, 3 lines off the bottom, Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Metargeminon Kedushas Oovah L'Tzion. We translate into Aramaic the Kedushah that we recite within Oovah L'Tzion. We say, Va'ata Kadosh Yeshev Tehillos Yisrael, the Kara Zel Zeva Amar, and then we say Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakos V'loicha La'aretz Kivoidai. That's all Lashon HaKodesh. Then we translate it into Aramaic, and we say Umekabelin Dain Min Dain. The Malachim receive, so to speak, permission one from the other. Va'amrin, and they say Kaddish Bishmei Meroima, holy and Kadosh in the heavens, Ilah Beis Shechinte, up on high in the abode of his divine presence, Kaddish al Ara Ovad Gevurte, holy on the earth, which is the product of his might, Kaddish la'olam la'olmei olmaya, and Kadosh and holy forever and for all eternity. So that is Kedushah. There we have the three Kedushahs, Kaddish Bishmei Meroima, Kaddish al Ara, Kaddish la'olam la'olmei olmaya, Hashem Tzavakos, Mal Yachal Ara Ziv Yikare, the entire world is filled with the radiance of his glory. So that's, we translate Kedushah into Aramaic. So to the pasuk of Baruch Kvaid Hashem Imekaimai, we say, Unitalasni Rucha, this is the Navi speaking, a wind lifted me, Vishemeis Basrai, and I heard coming from behind me, Kol Zia Sagi, a voice, a sound of great noise, the Meshabchin Va'amrin, of those malachim that were praising the Rabbeinu Shalom and saying, Brich Yikara da Hashem, gebenched is the glory of the Rabbeinu Shalom, may asar beishchinte, from the presence of his holy abode. So that's Baruch Kvaid Hashem Mimekaimai, from his place. So that's Baruch Kvaid Hashem Mimekaimai translated into Aramaic. And this is what the Mechaber says, Mitargaminon Kedushas Oovah L'Tzion. We translate the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion into Aramaic. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Aleph. Why do we do this? Mitargaminon Kedei Sheyavinu HaKol, so that everybody should be able to understand what it is when we're saying Kedushah. Aramaic at the time was the language of the masses. So in Oovah L'Tzion we translated Kedushah into Aramaic. Says the Mechaber weiter, V'tzarich lizaher boi me'oid. We have to take great care when reciting the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion, la'omroi b'kavana, to say it with kavana, with concentration, and with intent. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why is this so important? The Amrinan b'Gemara, this is Mishnah Berurah's Cotton Bays, the Amrinan b'Gemara, and for those of you who are learning Daf Yomi, you had this not that long ago, Saita Mem Tes Amud Aleph, Miyayim Shecharav Hamikdash, from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Bavin Yiseinu Harabim, Al Makai, the world stands, Akedusha de Sidra. The world exists and stands on the schus of Kedusha de Sidra, on the schus of the Kedusha of Oovah L'Tzion. And we'll get back to that shortly. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kisham Akrizin Davar, when they have to announce something in Shul. If there's an announcement that must be made for the Tzibur in Shul, Yesh Lahakriz Kaidim Shamaskal Hashleach Tzibur Loimer Ashrei. The announcements should be made between the Chatzi Kaddish after Tachdon and Ashrei. V'loi bein Ashrei l'Lamanatzeach. They should not make any announcements between Ashrei and Lamanatzeach. V'choshkein, and that is, as I told you at the outset of the shir, since Ashrei, the purpose of Ashrei, that the reason we recite Ashrei is because of its connection to Oovah L'Tzion. We don't want to be mafsik between Ashrei and Oovah L'Tzion. Now you'll ask me, why do we say Lam Natseach? The reason we say Lam Natseach is because once we say Ashrei for Oovah L'Tzion, and in Ashrei we're going to say Pesach es Yadecha, we praise the Rabbeinu Shalom. Pesach es Yadecha is not a request. Pesach es Yadecha is a statement of fact. We turn to the Rabbeinu Shalom and we say, fact. Pesach es Yadecha, you open your hand, umazbiya l'chol chai, and you satisfy all living creations, ratzain, with their desires. Now, exactly what that pasuk means, we could spend a whole hour on for another time. But lamaisa, we say Ashrei because, as we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan, it contains the aspects of Kedushah. Ashrei also has in it the great pasuk of Pesach es Yadecha Mazbiya l'chol chai ratzain, where we acknowledge that the Rabbeinu Shalom gives us our sustenance. And in Ashrei, we ask the Rabbeinu Shalom also. We speak about Einei Chalalecha Yisaberu, all eyes have their hope in you. So we're speaking about the Rabbeinu Shalom supplying us with our needs. So too, after Ashrei, we say Lam Natzech and we say Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara. That the Rabbeinu Shalom should help us if Chas v'Chalila we're experiencing a tzara. And then we go to Oovah L'Tzion. But to be mafsik between Ashrei and Oovah L'Tzion with an announcement for the tzibur, that we don't want to do. And that's why the Chavetz Chaim says you got to make announcements, make them before Ashrei. Continues the Chavetz Chaim when he says, V'chol shekain, certainly, b'shah she'omer ma'kal Ashrei oiseder Kedushah, certainly you should not make any announcements during Ashrei or during the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion. Shetispatel al yidei zeh kavanosan. If you do, you're going to be mavatal the tzibur from having kavanah. Let's go back now to the Shulchan Aruch before I speak more about this, what we just learned here in this Mishnah Berurah. Let's see the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Haga, Ule'inyan im hayochid oimra. Could a yochid, somebody diving alone without the tzibur, could he say the Kedushah desidra, the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion? We know we don't say the Kedushah of Chazaras Hashatz b'yechidus, we need a minyan. So says the Ramah, Dina kedin Kedushah shebeyoytzer. The Ramah says that the halacha of the Kedushah desidra, the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion, is identical to the halacha of the Kedushah that we say within Birchas Kriya Shema, V'ayin La'el Siman Nun Tes, and for that, he sends us back to Siman Nun Tes Sif Gimel. Now, if you take a look in Mishnah Berurah's Cotton Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah says, V'ayin La'el Siman Nun Tes, the Sham Masik HaRamah, over there the Ramah concluded, the Nispashe Taminig Loimar Af B'Yochid, that the minig has become widespread and accepted, that we do say Kedushah of Birchas Kriya Shema even b'yechidus. Now what's interesting is, there seems to be a little bit of a difference between the Kedushah of Birchas Kriya Shema and the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion. One of the reasons we say the Kedushah of Birchas Kriya Shema even b'yechidus is because of what we saw earlier in the Aruch HaShulchan. That Kedushah is really only a sipur dvarim. It's only us relating what goes on in Shemayim, but it's not us saying Kedushah. That's one of the reasons brought down why we could say that Kedushah b'yechidus. That's not true of the Kedushah desidra of Oovah L'Tzion. Over there we are saying Kedushah. Yet, the Ramah says that the Kedushah desidra we could also say b'yechidus. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, lechatchila tov yoser loyma b'tzibur. Certainly, lechatchila, it is better to say it b'tzibur. Now, because of that, the Chavetz Chaim here in the Mishnah Berurah has an interesting psak, halakha l'maisa. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Valkain, therefore, im hatzibur hischilu loymar va'ata kadosh. Let's say the tzibur is already up to Kedushah desidra. So the Chazan is saying, V'ata kadosh yeshev tilois Yisrael, v'karazel zev yamar. So they're already up to Oovah L'Tzion. V'hu lo yamar adayin Ashrei Oovah L'Tzion. You're lagging behind the tzibur. You just finished tachtim. You didn't even start saying Ashrei yet. They're already up to V'ata kadosh. What do? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Yesh loy la'amroi imahem. You should say Kedushah desidra together with the tzibur. So they're up to V'ata kadosh. You should say V'ata kadosh yeshev tilois Yisrael v'karazel zev yamar. You should answer kadosh 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 Hashem tzvakos together with the tzibur. Then you should say the targum of the Kedushah, and then V'ataseini ruach and Baruch Kvad Hashem im kaimai, and the targum of Baruch Kvad Hashem im kaimai. V'achakach, and then later, when you personally get up to Ashrei Oovah L'Tzion, Yomer Ashrei, you'll say Ashrei, V'lamanatzeach, and you'll say Lamanatzeach, because that's the matbeah of Tefillah, that's the proper seder of Tefillah, even though you already said the Kedushah desidra, and really the Ashrei is only there because of the Kedushah desidra, and the Lamanatzeach is only there because of Ashrei, but it doesn't matter. Even though you already said the Kedushah desidra, you have to follow the matbeah of davening, you have to follow the proper seder at Tefillah. You'll also say the psukim of Oovah L'Tzion Goyel Shevet Pesher B'Yaakov Dum Hashem V'Aniza is Prisi Amar Hashem Tahainu Oovah L'Tzion V'Aniza is Prisi, and then you'll skip the Kedushah desidra part of Oovah L'Tzion, and then you could say the rest of Oovah L'Tzion. That's the psak of the Mishnah Berurah. Not, and I want to be clear about this, the psak of the Mishnah Berurah is not that you should say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh at Baruch Kvod Hashem Im Kaimai together with the tzibur, and then repeat it again when you get up to it b'yechidus. No, the psak of the Mishnah Berurah is say from Va'ata Kadosh all the way, all the way through, I believe, to Hashem Yimloich La'olam Va'ed. That you should say together with the tzibur. Then go back to what you're up to, and then when you come up to Ashrei and Oovah L'Tzion, you'll say Ashrei Lamnatseach, the first two psukim of Oovah L'Tzion, and then you'll continue Hashem Elokeinu Avram Yitzchak Yisrael Aviseinu Shamar Zayis La'olam. That's the psak of the Mishnah Berurah. Others disagree, but this is a Mishnah Berurah shir. Okay. Now, let's finish the Ramah here. Says the Ramah, second line for the bottom here in Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Uba Kedushah Shebetargum, when it comes to reciting the Targum portion of the Kedushah, the Aramaic part, the halacha, interestingly enough, is quite the opposite. Yochid Oimra, over there, really a Yochid should say it alone, V'loi Shnayim, and two people should not say it together. What does that mean? Everybody's davening in shul together. Concludes the Ramah, V'ein la'amra b'kol ram. In order to be mekayim this halacha, what we do is we say the Targum part of the Kedushah, right? Umekabel dein min dein v'amrin kaddish b'shmei merayma, or brich yikar Hashem, brich yikar Hashem asar b'shchinte, that we say quietly. Because if we say it quietly, it's as if we're saying it b'yechidus. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Dalet, the bottom line of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Uba Kedushah Shebetargum, Ritzaynoi Loimar. What the Ramah means to say is, the Psuke HaKedusha Shebelashon HaKodesh, the Lashon HaKodesh psukim of the Kedushah Desidra, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Hashem Tzvakos, Baruch Kvod Hashem Imekaimai, Nemra Dafka Barabim. That we try lechatchila to say it barabim and not b'yechidus, and that's why we just said say it together with the tzibur. B'di'eved, you could say it b'yechidus too, but we would prefer that you should say it barabim. Upsuke HaKedusha Shebetargum, but the Aramaic psukim nemarim dafka b'yachid. That really is only said b'yechidus. Why? Levisha kolshu b'lashet targum ein loimer oisa barabim, because whatever is said in Aramaic, we don't say out loud. Interesting. It's based on a Zoyar. So this is kind of Divrei Kabbalah. This is one of the things that's brought down, that really Aramaic is something from the Sitra Achra. And when we say something in Aramaic, we're giving koyach to the Sitra Achra. So Aramaic, we say quietly. Gant Shas Bavli is written in Aramaic, beyond my pay grade. But Lamaisa, the bottom line is, this is the halacha lamaisa. When you say Oovah L'Tzion, even in shul, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Hashem Tzvakos B'loi Chalaretz K'vaydai, Baruch Kvod Hashem Imekaimai, those we say out loud. Umekabelin dein min dein v'amrin kaddish b'shmei merayma v'chulei, or Brich Yikar Hashem Asa B'shchinte, that we say quietly, because we don't really want to be saying it berabim. Valkain, Kishayrim Kedusha Desidra B'tzibur. Therefore, when we say the Kedusha Desidra in shul, Aimer Kol Yachid B'ftei Atzmai Balachash HaTargum Shalak Kedusha. The Aramaic portion of it, we each say quietly. The Ozloi Mikri B'tzibur, because then it's as if we're not saying it B'tzibur. V'zeu ma shesiyam Ramah, and this is the intent of the Ramah when he concludes his words, and he says, Shaloi la'amram b'koil ram. That's what the Ramah means when he says, Uba Kedusha Shebetargum, Yachid Oimra V'loi Shnayim. Really, one person should say it alone. Even two people shouldn't say it together. And therefore, V'ein la'oimra b'kol ram. Therefore, you should not say it loud. V'mispal shaloi b'tzibur. Somebody's davening b'yechidus at home. Yachal loimer gam hatargum b'kol ram. Then he could say the targum out loud too, because it's not a problem of him saying it together with anybody else. Now, the Mishnah Berurah mentioned over here, in the very beginning of Ois Cotton Bays, he brought down the Gemara in Site on Mem Tesam and Aleph that says, Miyoim Shecharav Hamigdash, from the day that the Beis Hamigdash was destroyed by Aviniseinu Harabim, Olma Kai, the world stands at Kedushah Desidra. The world stands on the schus of Kedushah Desidra. What exactly does that mean? So it's funny, I was going to bring down the Gemara and cite everything else. Then I saw that the Dirshu has a very nice footnote on it. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I'll read to you Dirshu footnote number 1. Says the footnote here, Upirish Rashi Sham. Rashi says, Saita Memtes Amid Aleph Divrei Amaschal HaKedushah. Rashi says, Shetiknuha, why were the Chazal misakein that we should say Kedushah Desidra, Lashon HaKodesh and Aramaic every day? Why? We said Ashrei is there because of Kedushah. But why is Kedushah there? Why would he say Kedushah Desidra? He says here, and this is a quote from Rashi, Kedei sheyiu kol Yisrael oiskim b'Torah b'chol yom davar muat. The reason is so that every member of Klal Yisrael should be oisik b'Torah. There should be some aspect of limud HaTorah by every yid every day. Shebazeh she'omrim kriyasai v'targumai, because from the fact that we're saying Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakos, Melech ha'aretz kivaydai, which is a pasuk in Lashon HaKodesh, and then we're going out of our way to translate it in the common tongue and translate it into Aramaic, Harehem ka'oiskim b'Torah. So that's as if we're sitting and learning Torah, right? Somebody is sitting and learning Torah, so he'll learn a pasuk in Chumash, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ves haaretz. In the beginning of Hashem's creating the world, the Rebbeinu Shalom created the heaven and the earth. So I just learned a pasuk in Chumash. I read the pasuk in Chumash and I translated it, learned pshat in it. So the same thing, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzvakos, V'lai Kol Haaretz Kivaydai. What does it mean? And now we explain it in Aramaic. Ubekabel in Dain in Dain, V'amrin Kadosh B'Shmei Merayma. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Kadosh up in Shamayim, Kadosh Al Ara. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Kadosh here on this earth. So we're learning Torah. V'kevan shenoyeg davar zeh b'chol Yisrael, b'talmidei chachamim u'ba'amei ha'aretz. And since Gans Klal Yisrael is doing this, talmidei chachamim, amei ha'aretz, v'yesh kan shtei mitzvos, and we're also being mekayim 2 mitzvos by doing this. Kedushas Hashem, we're being mekadesh Shem Shamayim with what we're saying, v'talmud Torah, and we're also being oisik in Torah, so we're being mekayim the great mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Chaviva hi Kedushah zu. This Kedushah is very beloved to the Rebbeinu Shalom, sheyiskayim b'shvila ha'olam, and the world could stand because of this. Now, Uba Shabbos we don't say Kedushah Desidra by Shachris. It's a very interesting why. It brings it down over here. Uba Shabbos ein omrim Oovah L'Tzion b'tfilas habayker. On Shabbos we don't say Oovah L'Tzion in the morning davening in the Shachris, ela b'mincha. We say it by mincha. Why do we delay Kedushah Desidra to Minchad Shabbos? Ba'atam, the reason for this is Kasav L'Kaman, we'll learn it later. Mirtz Hashem, Bezos Hashem Yisparach, and Siman Reish Tzadik Beis. Shekevan Shema'arichim Harbe B'Shachris Musaf. Since the morning davening on Shabbos is very long, Shachris, Musaf, Kriyas HaTorah, Henichua Ara Mincha. They left over Oovah L'Tzion for Mincha. This is because of Tercha D'Tzibura. We don't want to be too matriach the tzibur too much. There isn't supposed to be a lachatz in davening. Davening is not supposed to be something that becomes a drag. It's not supposed to become something that chas v'chalila should be unpleasant. It's supposed to be pleasant. So it's long enough as it is. We don't have to go make it longer by putting in Oovah L'Tzion. And by the way, and this is the Oovah L'Tzion that we just said that the world stands on Oovah L'Tzion. Still, we delay it to Mincha because of Tercha D'Tzibura, Rabbi Isai. So yes, Tercha D'Tzibura is a very important thing. The other thing that I would mention over here, because it's in Yonah D'Yoma, we're coming up to Shavuos, we're saying that the world stands on Kedushah Desidra. And we see that one of the reasons we're saying that the world stands on Kedushah Desidra is because it has an aspect of limud HaTorah in it. You see the gavaldikus chus of daily limud HaTorah, that the world stands because of limud HaTorah. Now the truth is, that's not such a chiddush. This time of year, we all remember the Maamar Chazal that says that by Kabbalas HaTorah, Klal Yisrael came to Har Sinai, the Rebbeinu Shalom picked up Har Sinai, Kafa Aleim Har Kigigis, the Rebbeinu Shalom put the mountain of Har Sinai over Klal Yisrael like an overturned jug. Right? Imagine a mountain, and imagine if the mountain was hollow inside. And now the Rebbeinu Shalom is taking the mountain, putting it over Klal Yisrael, so it's like an overturned jug is over Klal Yisrael. once heard from somebody in the construction industry who was dealing with some nefarious individuals that wanted a certain contract from him, and the threat that they gave him was a very interesting threat. They were talking about dumpsters. So these thugs pointed out to the site foreman. He says, if we take a 40-yard container, empty, and turn it upside down with you underneath it, so you're stuck inside over there, you'll be there for a month. Nobody will know that you're there. So the Rebbeinu Shalom Koif Aleim Har Kegigis. The Rebbeinu Shalom took the mountain like an overturned jug and positioned it over Klal Yisrael and said, if you're Makabel the Torah, fine. If you're not Makabel the Torah, Shalom take for Aschem. So that's it. You're stuck under the mountain. Now, what's very odd about that Ma'amar Chazal, and what everybody struggles with that Ma'amar Chazal, is it sounds like that means that Klal Yisrael were Makabel the Torah under duress, that we had no choice. The Rebbeinu Shalom threatened us. So one of the things that I always like to say is, no, you're misinterpreting what Chazal are saying. It's not that the Rebbeinu Shalom was threatening Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom was explaining to Klal Yisrael the Chashivas HaTorah. What the Rebbeinu Shalom was saying was like this. We all know the other Ma'amar Chazal, that first the Rebbeinu Shalom offered the Torah to Bnei Yishmael, the Rebbeinu Shalom offered the Torah to Bnei Esav. Everybody turned it down. Then the Rebbeinu Shalom offered it to Klal Yisrael took it. And the way we have the Ma'amar Chazal, the Rebbeinu Shalom offered it to the Bnei Yishmael. The Bnei Yishmael said, what does it say in the Torah? The Rebbeinu Shalom said, it says you can't steal. The Bnei Yishmael said, forget it, we can't live by that. The Rebbeinu Shalom offered it to the Bnei Esav. The Bnei Esav said, what does it say in it? It says you can't murder. The Bnei Esav said, we can't live by that. Finally, the Rebbeinu Shalom offered it to Klal Yisrael took it. This is one of those Ma'amar Chazal that needs a lot of biur. It's something that we hear as a kid and we just accept it. Pshutai kamashmai, we accept it the way we heard it. But it's a very deep Ma'amar Chazal. One of the things, just to give you a little bit of what goes into that Ma'amar Chazal. What does it mean that the Rebbeinu Shalom offered it to Bnei Yishmael? The Bnei Yishmael said, what does it say in the Torah? Oh, it says you can't steal. Forget it, we can't accept the Torah that says don't steal. They also have laws against stealing. The Bnei Yishmael have laws against stealing. Every government has laws against stealing. So what, they can't accept a Torah that has a law against stealing? The answer is that there's a big difference between a man-made law that says that you can't steal and a divine law that says that you can't steal. If it's a man-made law that says that you can't steal, so then it's up to human interpretation what's called stealing. When am I not allowed to steal? If I decide that it's for the greater good, maybe I can steal, right? So if there comes a time that we want to take away all the Jewish money because the economy is suffering, now the government says that you can steal. So now there's nothing wrong. Or if the government wants to pass confiscatory tax policies, right, because they say that this is the new law that we want to make, now the government could steal. If the government wants to turn around and say we're not going to prosecute shoplifting anymore, so now somebody could come into Home Depot and steal all the light bulbs and walk out, so suddenly that level of stealing suddenly became mutter. So what's going on? So the answer is a man-made law of stealing, the Bnei Yishmael said, that we could live with, because that's something that we could tamper with and we could tweak however we want, but we want to be in charge. We want to be able to do whatever we think is for the greater good. The Rebbeinu Shalom's Torah is a divine Isser of Gezel. It says that stealing is divinely prohibited and forbidden. That's not something that you could tweak with. That stealing is prohibited, and it doesn't matter even if it's a pachas mishava pruta. You're not allowed to steal anything. Forget a light bulb. You're not allowed to steal a little piece of thread off a spool in Walmart. You're not allowed to steal anything. And you can't tweak it and you can't play with it. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're the government. It doesn't matter if you're the king. It doesn't matter who you are. You're not allowed to steal. So there's a big difference. Same thing with murder, right? How about government-sponsored murder, which happens, right? That's okay. That's B'nai Esav. They said, I don't want to be that it's a divine Isser. I want it to be a man-made Isser. Well, the Torah is a divine Isser. Now, going back to Kabbalah HaTorah, the Rebbeinu Shalom said was Kafalei Behar Kigigis. What the Rebbeinu Shalom said was like this: look, I offered the Torah to the Bnei Yishmael. They turned it down. I offered the Torah to the Bnei Esav. They turned it down. The Chazal tell us that the Rebbeinu Shalom offered it all over the place. Everybody turned it down. The Rebbeinu Shalom came to Klal Yisrael and said, look, the world was created for the Torah. Not only was the world created for the Torah, the Medrash tells us, Istakel ba'araisa ubara alma. The Rebbeinu Shalom created the world from the Torah. The Torah came before the world. Before the world existed, Chazal tells us the Torah was written, Eish chayr al gabi eish levana. It was black fire on white fire. Whatever that means. But the Rebbeinu Shalom created a world for Kiyam HaTorah. What the Rebbeinu Shalom told the Bnei Yisrael was, I offered the Torah around everywhere, nobody wants it. If nobody wants it, I'm going to shut the lights. The analogy that I like to use always is imagine that there's a family business that's been around for 50 years. Pick your business, a restaurant. There's a restaurant that's a family-owned restaurant. It's been around already for 2 generations. Maybe it's going on to the 3rd generation. And the waiters and the cooks and the dishwashers, they're all not family members, but they're all employees that have been working for the family business for decades. And maybe you have 2 generations or 3 generations of workers working in the restaurant. The accountant comes in and tells the owner of the restaurant, your business is bleeding out. You don't realize that you're losing money. The world changed. Now people get there, they want, you're serving good old-fashioned food. You're serving, you're serving schnitzel and potato latkes and cholent and pastrami sandwiches, or you're serving cheese blintzes and, good old traditional food. And now the world, they want sushi and they want thigh and they want keto and they want this and they want that. And your business is no longer viable. You're losing money. The only hope that I could give you is if you could make a substantial investment in the business and you could bring in a whole new menu and you could bring in a whole new ambiance and you could do a renovation and you could do a new marketing campaign, it could be that we could turn the business around. And the guy says, but I don't have the money for the investment. So the accountant says, here's the advice I could give you. Go to the employees and ask the employees if every employee is willing to take a 10% pay cut or a 15% pay cut temporarily. Now we'll be able to cut payroll back 15%. If we can cut payroll back 15%, that'll free up capital. We'll free up capital, we'll take a loan, we'll invest money into the business, we'll do a whole refresh, maybe we could turn the business around. So the owner sits down with the workers and he says, look, I'm going to share the news with you. This is the story. I have 2 choices in front of me. Either I just call it a day and I shut the lights, or if you're willing to work with me, and you're willing to at least take temporarily a pay cut. So maybe we'll work together, we'll turn this whole thing around, and hopefully, ultimately, it'll be good. It's not a threat. He's not threatening the workers, take a 15% pay cut or you lose your job. What he's telling them is, it's the only way I can make this viable. I want to make it viable for me, I want to make it viable for you. But the only way I can make it viable is if you take the 15% pay cut. Then maybe we have a business. If not, I don't have a business. I'm not keeping the business open just to keep employees employed. I'm keeping the business open and it has to make money. It can't lose money. So he's saying, look, this is the reality on the ground. If I don't have a business, I'm going to shut the lights. I'm going to put up a sign outside. Thank you for your 50 years of patronage, and now it's over. That's what the Rebbeinu Shalom told Klal Yisrael by Har Sinai. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, I created the world for the Torah. The Bnei Yishmael don't want it. The Bnei Esav don't want it. If you want it, fine. If you want it, then good. Then the world is viable. Then the world has a purpose. If you don't want it, then I'm shutting the lights. Now, if I'm shutting the lights, it's the end of you too. But it's not because I'm threatening you. It's just because there's no purpose left in the world. What we see over here is that the purpose of the world is Torah. We also see is, you want to see the tremendous chashivas on Torah. The little bit of Torah of Kaddish, 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 Hashem Tzvakais, B'loich Alaretz Kevaydai, or Mekabel Dein and Dein, V'Arbor Kaddish B'Shmei B'Roma, Ilah Beit Shchintei, that gives kiyum to the world. So halachos kama v'kama if you sit for an hour and you learn Mishnah Berurah. Halachos kama v'kama if you sit for another hour and you learn Daf Yomi. Halachos kama v'kama if you sit and you do Shtay Mikra V'Echa Targum. The schus of limud HaTorah, the little bit of schus of Oovah L'Tzion holds the world up. Imagine the tremendous amount of schus that you get for everything else. By the way, I just mentioned Shtay Mikra V'Echa Targum. That also applies to what we just learned. We just learned over here that the Lashon HaKodesh Psukim of Kedushah, that preferably should be said b'tzibur. The Targum, that is only supposed to be said by a Yachid. Shnayim Mikra, 2 people or more could say Lashon HaKodesh, that's Mikra, Ve'echad Targum. Targum is only said by a Yachid. Okay, we have a little bit more time over here. Let's go a little bit weiter. Says the Mechaber here, Sif Beis, top line, Yudal and Aleph. Aser la'adam lotzeis mibeis hakneses kaidim Kedushah desidra. The Mechaber says it is aser. It's forbidden for somebody to leave shul before Kedushah desidra, before the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion. Now, before we see the Mishnah Berurah inside, I just want, you have to understand where the Mechaber is coming from when the Mechaber says this, and how the Chavetz Chaim understood it. The Mechaber wrote in the Beis Yosef, I have the language of the Beis Yosef over here, one second. This came from the Siddur of Rav Amram Goyen, and we have the Beis Yosef quoting Rav Amram Goyen. V'hevi ha-Beis Yosef dvarav b'zeh loshen. The Beis Yosef quotes Rav Amram Goyen, and he writes like this: Aser la'adam lotzeis mibeis hakneses kaidim Kedushah desidra. It is forbidden for somebody to leave shul before the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion. Why? Shechayiv hu loimer Kedushah desidra. Because you're obligated to say the Kedushah desidra. The davar sha'olam is kayim alav, because something that's so chashuv that it's holding up the world, you can't be mezalzel in it. You can't treat the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion lightly. We just said that the world is standing because of the Kedushah of Oovah L'Tzion. That's the way the Beis Yosef quotes the Siddur of Rav Amram Goyen. So now, if the Mechaber understood Rav Amram Goyen that way, the Beis Yosef is Rabbi Yosef Kairoi, is the Mechaber of Shulchan Aruch. If that's the way the Beis Yosef understood Rav Amram Goyen, that means that the way the Mechaber understood Rav Amram Goyen is the reason why you can't leave shul because of before Kedushas desidra, before Oovah L'Tzion, is because you must say Kedushah desidra. Okay, so how about if I want to leave shul before Oovah L'Tzion, and I'm going to say Oovah L'Tzion at home? So fine, so I said Kedushah desidra. What's the problem? And there is no real answer to that question. It seems from the Beis Yosef, from the Mechaber, it sounds like, yes, you shouldn't leave before Kedushah desidra, but that's only because you have to say Oovah L'Tzion. So if you'll say Oovah L'Tzion at home, okay. So against that backdrop, let's see the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, it's aser lotzeis mibeis hakneses kaidim Kedushah desidra. Explains the Chavetz Chaim why. The kaven da ha'olam miskayim al zeh. Because since the world stands on Kedushah desidra, tzarich lizar milazalzel bazeh. So you can't be mezalzel in it. So don't leave shul before Oovah L'Tzion. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, Olefi ma shebiarnu le'el, according to what we said earlier in Ois Cotton Gimel that we said in the beginning of this year, Dinachin lahader la'amram b'tzibur, that it's better to be mahader to say Oovah L'Tzion b'tzibur. Memela tzarich lizar shalai lotzeis mikaidim. Memela, it comes out that you shouldn't leave shul before Oovah L'Tzion. Afilu im yirtza la'amra b'fnei atzmai. Even if you intend on saying Oovah L'Tzion b'yechidus later at home im loy b'shas adchak. So you see what's going on here. The Chavetz Chaim understood the Mechaber here in Sif Beis like this. I want you to understand why I'm pointing all of this out. Like this, if you would have looked at the Mechaber, you would say, what do you mean? The Mechaber says, Aser la'adam lotzeis mibeis hakneses kaidim Kedushah desidra. The Mechaber says a flat-out Isser. The Mechaber says it's Aser to leave before Oovah L'Tzion. Why do I need the Chavetz Chaim to tell me that according to what we said in Ois Cotton Gimel, that it's better to say Oovah L'Tzion b'tzibur, so you can't leave even if you intend on saying it b'yechidus? Why do I need the Chavetz Chaim to tell me that? The Mechaber didn't make any qualifications here in Sif Beis. The Mechaber said it's Aser to leave before Oovah L'Tzion. The answer is because you have to understand where the Mechaber is coming from. The Mechaber is coming from what he wrote in the Beis Yosef. The Mechaber wrote in the Beis Yosef, the reason it's Aser is because you must say Kedushah desidra. Okay, fine. So I'm leaving before Oovah L'Tzion and I'm going to say Kedushah desidra at home. According to the Mechaber, that's a valid possibility. But says the Chavetz Chaim, but not according to us, because I already told you that lechatchila you're supposed to say Kedushah Desidra B'tzibur. Oh, so now it's not such an eitzah to say it at home b'yechidus. So therefore, try not to leave before Oovah L'Tzion, even if you intend on saying Oovah L'Tzion b'yechidus. Still don't leave, because I want you to say Kedushah Desidra B'tzibur. Ois Katan Vav, Kedushah Desidra, Hu Kedushas Oovah L'Tzion. Of course, the words Kedushah Desidra are a reference to the Kedusha of Oovah L'Tzion. We're going to stop over here with the words of the Ramah. I'm not concerned with the fact that we didn't do much of today's page, because we did half of the Mishnah Berurah, and if you turn the page to Yadalit Amud Beis, you'll see that there's a very, very short amount of Mishnah Berurah and a very short amount of Ramah tomorrow. Even the next day is relatively short, so I'm not concerned. Don't worry that we're falling behind. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua for first panos and shidduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the bias tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.